Well, good morning, and dear President Andreas Mund, distinguished colleagues and guests. I'm also very pleased that you made it to Berlin, and indeed what Andreas Mund just said is very true. There is always someone on strike in Germany. When I was still young, many years ago, this was true for many European countries. A lot of strikes going on. In my view, this is now all about European convergence. So we are coming closer as Germany to the rest of the European Union. So maybe this is normality. I at least hope so. And we have to manage these new challenges. And the second point I would like to mention is it's very easy today to find out the translation for it could, because we have artificial intelligence. So to tell you the truth, the translation is, whatever will be, will be. Que sera, sera. And this indeed helps to overcome these challenges. And having said that, it's a real pleasure for me to speak to you today about competition challenges, competition law. I'm not an expert in competition law, but I try my very best to make clear where we are and where we see the main challenges ahead of us. And let me first tell you that, of course, there is a need for more and better international exchange and cooperation. And that is why it's good to have so many colleagues around today from so many countries. And we have to preserve competition, and it's even more important in current times to preserve competition. And we would see in the Ministry for Economic Affairs three developments, and the President just mentioned some of them. There's a high global uncertainty nowadays. There's geopolitical risks arising that tend to fragment markets, and of course, there is a discretionary use of trade policies rather than following what we just heard, a so-called rules-based approach. And in today's world, I would see on that basis three tasks for competition policy authorities. First, of course, we together have to preserve competition as our engine of growth and prosperity. And second, we have to defend competition enforcement. And third, of course, we have to go on preserving the rule of the law in a world of growing political pressure and geopolitical pressure. And of course, for the European Union, that also means it includes the Digital Markets Act. And of course, you might argue that these are very good and important principles, but how to keep these principles alive in today's world? And I really have to tell you that the world has changed dramatically since Andreas Mund and myself, we joined the Ministry for Economic Affairs in the 90s. I guess you joined 91. I joined 1990. So we cannot compare the world of the 90s with today's world. It's so much more complex that we really have to sit together and reflect about the best ideas how to overcome these challenges. And that is exactly what we will do today and tomorrow. So on these challenges, I would see three main policy challenges for Germany as well as for the European Union. And you all know, I guess, what I'm talking about. It's first that we need to talk about defense. I think we all share the view that we need a quick rearmament and better defense readiness. How can we contribute to that? Question mark. The second is we need a higher degree of resilience. We have to manage trade disruption, and we have to manage security of supply chains very urgently. And third, it's all about competitiveness as our source for growth also in future times. We need more innovation and scale on the global stage. Competition policy cannot solve all these challenges, but of course, again, we can ask ourselves how we can contribute to a good solution in all these three areas. First, let me come back to the question of defense. In my view, there's really a need for scale, and it means consolidation and more cooperation within the European Union. The European Union could be much stronger with better European coordination and cooperation, especially in the defense sector. And we all know that the Bundeskartellamt, as well as the European Commission, you had been quite flexible under merger and antitrust framework. At the same time, I think we have to look even beyond that, and we have to look at the competition side in defense at the same time to further protect the taxpayer. It's not just a solution to merge and to merge and to merge, but of course we need to keep some kind of competition. And of course we have to further foster the much needed innovation also when it comes to defense. And whenever I talk to our colleagues and friends in Ukraine, I'm very deeply impressed about the level of innovation in Ukraine. Of course, under traumatic circumstances, we can a lot learn from the innovation in the defense sector in Ukraine. It's not a one-way street that we help the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians will also help us in that respect. And of course, it goes without saying that a deeper integrated EU market for defense would also help us a lot, and we would all benefit of scale and competition in that respect. And the second point is on competition and resilience. And maybe some of you still remember what Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, and today's Canadian Prime Minister, said in Davos some weeks ago. He outlined his idea about his hedging strategy. He said we have to diversify to hedge against uncertainty. That means better and more cooperation, especially between like-minded countries. And this is what we urgently need. And of course, this means for the European Union that we also need more and faster trade agreements with the rest of the world. And there's a lot of things and negotiations which is undergoing and will hopefully be implemented very, very soon. Resilience in economics is defined as positive adaptability, flexibility, and capacity to change, associated with sustainability and diversity of supply. And therefore, there are lots of overlap with traditional competition policy. Sourcing from trusted partners is a good, an excellent hedge against potential choke points on a global level. And of course, we should further discuss the potential need for change, for dynamic change in competition policies. I would see it in a twofold way. I think we should see how we can integrate the existence of new market barriers and fragility of supply chains into assessment of single cases. And of course, second, the merger control. On the side of merger control, there could be some or maybe few instances in security-related areas where the European Union consolidation is preferable over non-European consolidation. And third, on competition and competitiveness, and I just mentioned competitiveness as our main source, together with innovation for growth and prosperity also in future times. I think we have to do more on the side of innovation and competitiveness. This is true for Germany, and this is true for the European Union as a whole. We see a need to complete the internal market, and maybe again some of you have seen the findings by the International Monetary Fund about the internal barriers in the internal market of the European Union, adding up to a similar 110% of tariffs on services, 44% on goods. And of course, the internal market has increased European GDP by 3 to 4%. Completing the internal market could double that effect, and these are very impressive numbers in my view. Of course, we also need urgently to improve the conditions for firms and founders, and we need to retain and attract skills in that internal market. On competition versus industrial policy, of course, there's no need to repeat old debates today and here, but let me address two concrete policy areas. The first is merger control and the so-called European champions debate. On the reform of the EU merger guidelines, the German government's position is differentiated. It should keep well-functioning structures of merger control, but we need to account for scale on the global stage as well. And of course, we have made proposals to adapt the assessment of potential competition and efficiencies. On the public procurement side and on the current debate of Buy European, and you will see a lot of further debate in the days and weeks to come because the European Commission has presented its proposals under the Industrial Accelerator Act only a few days ago, and we really have to find now the right balance between European preference and local content on the one hand, and keeping our like-minded partners in the boat on the other hand. I think we have to see also how we can contribute to that very important debate. We have to simplify public procurement in that respect. And of course, we have to define what we mean with made in Europe in future times. You might know that the German government does not very much support the made in Europe, but the made with Europe, just to make clear that we need our like-minded partners. And of course, it would be a little bit absurd, on the one hand, to advocate for more free trade agreements, and on the other hand, to close the European Union and the internal market for external partners by the principle of European preference and local content. But again, we have to have that discussion over the next weeks and months to come, and we have to conclude that debate within the year 2026, I guess. And a word on the EU competition law reform. The German position in the ongoing review of the foreign subsidies regulation covers three areas and three proposals. First, the focus on sectors under threat by strategic subsidy policies. Second, the increase of the current thresholds. And third, switch from current ex-ante notification to call-in system for mergers and public procurement. And on the current reform of the antitrust enforcement regulation 2003, we in the German government welcome the Commission's approach to keep stricter national law on abuse of dominance. But we also need better coordination on cases with significant effect on the internal market. And in general, the best placed authority, in my view, best placed authority with the best instrument should at the end of the day also enforce. Germany is open for joint enforcement, and we aim to a reform that should speed up the proceedings at the end of the day. And on the national competition law reform, what are we doing nationally? I think I promised not to mention the oil prices and the current situation around Iran, but only a few words about petrol prices in Germany. And I guess petrol prices in Germany are not necessarily comparable with the petrol prices in other European countries. So I guess there's no real internal market when it comes to petrol prices. But of course, there's a very important and very sometimes also challenging debate in Germany what we can do. And we will, as the German government, introduce a framework on the daily price changes at petrol stations based on the so-called Austrian model. The increase in price will only be possible once a day. In addition, we will assess how to tighten the control of abuse on dominance in the petrol sector. Industry remains under close monitoring, also from the Kartellamt, for excessive prices under competition law. And the ministry will present a reform of the German Competition Act as early as possible. One focus should be the merger control, and we should really discuss the current thresholds and see how we can increase in turnover thresholds and the amendment to transaction value thresholds to better capture killer acquisitions and at the same time reduce the burden on the business. In this context, the European turnover thresholds and merger regulation, as I just learned yesterday, is unchanged for 30 years now. 30 years, I could have not imagined that. So that means it should really be increased. An overall aim is to alleviate burden on business and on the Bundeskartellamt. And as just Andreas Mund said, we are all bureaucrats, but we don't like bureaucracy. And that is why we should really see how we can decrease bureaucracy wherever we can, and we should work as efficient as possible. And ladies and gentlemen, to sum up a few words or maybe 3 messages. The first one is, of course, we have to continue. We all together, this includes your authorities and your agencies. We have to improve the conditions for business in the European Union, in Germany, and in many other countries. This is very important, and again, innovation is our source for growth in future times. And the second is, as the President just said, we have to stand together to defend the rule of the law and independent competition enforcement. And the third is, we really have to intensify our international cooperation. Germany is not an island, the European Union is not an island, and that is why we need that kind of international cooperation, and we need international friends being with us like you are with us today. Many, many thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steffen. Just 2 questions, if you allow. I talked a lot about independence, and of course it would be very interesting to hear from the policy level, what does independence mean for the policy level, for the government? What defines an independent agency? How independent can an agency be? I always say it is, of course, embedded in policy, but we are not a political body. Would you share that, or what is your view on that?
I would totally share the view that you are not a political body, and for many good reasons you should not become a political body. And the word independence is something that we have to define together on a daily basis, what independence means. And I'd like to give you an example, and because I've been in the board of the BaFin in Bonn, which is our financial services supervisory authority. I'd been a board member for around 8 years. And we always had been discussing the principle of independence and what does it mean. And to be true, I had to report back to the Ministry of Finance on a monthly basis. I never liked it. I never liked it. I had to go to Berlin. I have to sit like I'm sitting here on a chair, you know, getting questions from the ministry. What are you doing? And what will be next? What about the risks? And tell us more and give us a written report about what BaFin is doing. I never liked it. But of course, I had to accept that there is a close link between an important enforcement authority and the political level. And at the same time, it was crystal clear also for the Ministry of Finance that BaFin is operationally independent. And I think we really have to define what operationally independent means. And that means that politicians should not interfere with cases and with single decisions. This is up to the authorities, this is up to you to decide on cases. But when it comes to the more, I would call it, systemic view, and of course the legal framework, in my view, it goes without saying. And again, we both joined the Ministry for Economic Affairs decades and centuries ago. It was always crystal clear that there can be a legislative process to amend the legislative framework. And of course, then we have to respect this new legal framework, and then we have to act accordingly. So what I'm saying is, don't touch operational independence, but let's accept that the politicians and politics can change the overall frame, and that is true for the national framework as well as for the European framework.
I think we can well live with that. I mean, it's clear that policy sets the
I
framework.
was hoping that you can live with that, because you have to live with that.
Yeah. And I do hope that you feel a little bit more comfortable sitting next to me than sitting next to me.
I do. I really do. I would love to stay here for the rest of the day.
You're most welcome. One more question that is also on the borderline of enforcing competition law and policy, that is about European champions. I think we would all agree that we need European champions, national champions, European champions, no matter as you put it. The question is how we get there. And for us, the key question is, do we get there by relaxing merger control, or is the key to improve the preconditions for champions in Europe, maybe especially in the digital sector? So I would be very happy if you could just say a few words on that question.
Yeah, I think it's an important question. I would love to discuss that further, because we need both, especially in the digital sector. We need more competition, we need more innovation, and at the same time, looking at the United States, we also need bigger players in the digital sector. And what we now see nowadays in China is also a little bit frightening, that at the end of the day, the European Union and we as Europeans, we might lose the race in the digital sector. So how we can balance, on the one hand, competition going on in the digital sector, the search for better ideas, but at the same time to have some kind of role as a European Union on the global level is an important goal that we should achieve. And sometimes I have the impression that merger controls is some kind of, let's say, excuse why things are not going into the right direction. I don't believe that. I think that merger control and competition authorities are doing a great job, especially in the digital sector, and to enforce the European laws. And I think we maybe have to gather better to explain what we are doing, and that we don't hinder players to work together, to cooperate on a global level. And that is what we should do in future times. So merger control is not the problem. In my view, it's rather the part of the solution that we should focus on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steffen, for
Thank
this
you.
clear statement. And much success for your work, and thanks that you've been with us, and yet for your clear statement, especially on merger control at the very end. It's most welcome. Thank you very much.
We keep in touch.